Does it make sense? Is a question buyers ask when they're about to do something the seller is probably going to hate. I've got a story and some perspective on what makes sense in today's market. So a buyer client of mine had their eye on a particular property that had undergone a significant price reduction, which brought the place back onto their radar. My client, however, still didn't agree with the price and felt that there should be still a lot of room to come down to the tune of about another 15% further discount. And the client asked me the fateful question, does that number make sense? In my opinion, there's three different perspectives that need to be considered when it comes to what makes sense, and you need alignment between two of those perspectives for a sale to happen. The first perspective is, does it make sense for the market? This should be completely objective and should remove buyer and seller sentiments from the scenario, but would be based on either precedent or current market dynamics. For example, if a 3-bed, 3-bath detached home in Davisville becomes available for sale, previous sales of similar homes nearby should help determine its value. Rarely are two homes alike, and often adjustments need to be made in order for things to level up. But point being, those past sales should help dictate what that home is worth. Another example would be what buyers often deal with when trying to purchase a property. Because the market has very often favored sellers over the past decade, providing a firm offer, meaning one with no outs for the buyer, has made sense based on the market. Doing that hasn't necessarily made sense to the buyers, by the way, but they'd have to do it if they wanted to buy a popular home. Another way to look at what makes sense is from the buyer's perspective, with my client's view on price being a perfect example. They were looking at neighborhood sales and their own needs and comparing them to this property, and the price the seller was asking didn't make sense to them. The interesting thing about a person's perspective is that it can be subjective. The asking price of that place didn't make sense to my client, but maybe it makes sense to another buyer. And why it does or doesn't make sense might have to do with personal circumstances and not market dynamics. A 3-bedroom house with a really small middle bedroom might not make sense for a family of 4, but it might make perfect sense for 2 professionals with no kids. Features of the home will make sense to some, but not others. What makes sense to a buyer might also be due to their financial situation and their affordability or their bias when it comes to personal finance. I guarantee that there are people watching this video right now who think that $1 million for a house is the most absurd thing they've ever heard, and yet that's basically the average price of a home in Toronto. The last perspective I'll mention is that of the seller. In an ideal world, they'll take a look at what their neighbor sold for, consider any adjustments based on certain criteria, and list at or below what many would consider market value. But in some circumstances, you'll get that subjectivity and human emotion coming out. My place is worth way more than that one. I've got porcelain tiles in the bathroom and we've just laid new carpet in the basement. Again, financial circumstances may dictate what makes sense to them. Consider a flipper who bought the home, put renovation money into it, and needs to sell for a certain number in order to make a profit. Their asking price might make sense to them because of that, but not to the buyers or the market. Using my client's story as an example, the sellers had just reduced the price a huge number, and my client was suggesting that the home was worth even less by that same amount again. Even if my buyer's number made sense based on the market, it almost certainly wasn't going to make sense to the seller based on the timing of their price reduction. Or think about a seller who is in a lot of financial trouble. They've lost their job and their mortgage payments have gone up due to rising interest rates, so they need to get out from under that place fast. That's likely a recipe for a home selling for a lot less than you'd think. Sales happen when something makes sense for both the buyer and the seller, but note that it doesn't have to make sense for the market. What appears to be a gross overpayment or a complete fire sale of a place are both due to an offer making sense based on personal circumstances to the people involved. I'm Jamie Harnish, Toronto Real Estate Navigator with Bosley Real Estate. I want to thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you watching. If you're catching this on YouTube, please like this video, subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any upcoming videos.